And welcome to Cleveland Baseball Insider. I'm editor Matt Loede, joining today one of the best in the business. He's got a new book out called Cleveland Rocked. It's all about the 1995 Cleveland Indians, which is a team that will forever go down in history as maybe the most favorite team, if I could say that right, by many Indians fans. And of course, we're talking about Zach Meisel from The Athletic. Zach, good afternoon. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm cooped up, just another day. Who knows what day of the week it is?
Yeah.
What time it is. Weather is doing,
dogs barking, usual day here in paradise. But it was interesting to me, before we talk a little bit about the book, I just want to, talk a little bit about where you're at with all of this stuff. You obviously, The Athletic is more of a, I guess you could use the term long form website, subscription-based website. So you're not more of one of the guys that does like a daily recap or anything like that, of course, unless something really serious happens. How has it been for you in terms of coming up with ideas and stuff to write about? Because obviously there isn't any real new material out there, and there really hasn't been for about the last 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, to be honest, I feel pretty fortunate just that I don't need to write 500 words about the daily minutia every day, which doesn't exist right now. And so I am thinking more long-term things, maybe just like deeper things that you need to tackle and you need to spend more time on, and you can't just think off the top of your head and write it and publish it, which, in a normal season, sometimes it can be difficult to tackle those things because so much is happening day to day. So in a way, it's almost, I don't want to say it's been to my benefit, but hey, if I need to call 6 people for this, well, what are they going to be doing right now?
Right.
At home, and their phone is in their hand anyway. It's been a bit of a luxury in that. I was in Arizona for a while, so I had material I could store. I had a bunch of ideas I had planned for the season that I'm just getting to maybe earlier than I would have. So, I feel really grateful that it hasn't affected me too much. It almost feels like it's an extension of the off season to me. But I'm saying that now, and it's April, and if this is still July, I might have a different answer.
You and I talk, a couple times a week via text, or maybe we'll catch up on a phone call here and there. But when you look at just kind of the landscape right now of how everything is going, whether it's, obviously the virus itself and, daily briefings from, Governor DeWine and President Trump and, doctors and everything like that. I mean, some people have argued with me that we're not going to see baseball at all. Some people have told me that baseball will be ready to go by June 1st. Do you have a thought in your mind of when we're going to see an actual game between two teams and hopefully one of them being the Indians again?
I really don't. And it's because I think back to a month ago where I think it was like exactly a month ago, spring training dispersed and just stopped on a dime. Everybody left. And think about everything that's happened in the last month, how much more we've learned, how things have changed. Think, okay, if all that's happened in the last month, think about everything that's going to happen over the next month.
Right.
And so how can you legitimately plan something ahead of time and think that you can have this elaborate, plan with a schedule and protecting thousands and thousands of people in Arizona, Florida, or wherever, and creating this bubble, like, all admirable. And you have to do the brainstorming, I think. But to say April 15th that, like, okay, plan is going to be on June 1st, we'll have opening day and we'll go from there. Like, I think it's ambitious, but it's not realistic, just because who knows, how do we know what they're going to be like on May 15th?
Right.
Or on
There's
June
just so many unknowns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think obviously as you mentioned yourself just now, things happen so fast. A month from now, we'd love to see it. It could all be gone and we could be back to life as we knew it a month ago, or it could be worse. And we certainly don't want that to happen. But, there's been some positive signs, I guess, in the last week about things kind of leveling off, which I think, gives people hope. But like you said, it's in a very ambitious, I think, of Major League Baseball to have, leaked out there to guys like Bob Nightingale and Jeff Passan that they are really bent on trying to make this season happen in some regard.
money talks, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Players want to get paid their full set. Teams want to make the revenue. I mean, the league made $11 billion last year. That's a lot to just
throw away.
That's a tough pill to swallow if you don't make anything. So, and also, I mean, you think about it, and if, the NBA and the NHL are kind of stuck in this hiatus, the NFL has time on its side because they don't have to rush into anything for a while. About it, and everyone is so desperate for real sports instead of watching video games or a Zoom conference horse tournament.
Right.
If baseball were to come back in some capacity, they'd have the attention span of the entire country, maybe the entire world, and that can be to their benefit. But you can't screw it up. You have to do it. You have to make sure everybody's safe, because one setback could just be a complete disaster.
Right. And I've said before, I mean, if you do it in Arizona, let's say, Arizona and Florida, which just kind of seems to be the prevailing thought, at least right now. How do you allow, say there's 4 reporters per team on an average basis? I mean, the Yankees have 10, but, and there's some teams like Oakland that have 1. But, say you have 4 reporters per team times 15 teams, that's 60 reporters, all going into one location. It's almost going to be like, the winter meetings, I guess, a little bit, because, you're going to have all these people going to one location to try to cover baseball. It just seems like a lot of logistical work to try to get anything like this put together in a very short period of time.
You would need the players' families, the front office, clubhouse staff, the hotel where they're staying, all the employees to be protected. You'd need, the bus drivers. How are you going to get food? Whoever's delivering the food for every meal, you need to make sure that they're healthy. It's a lot, and I understand how it could possibly be feasible, and there are just so many hurdles that they would have to clear. And, do you really expect all these people to just stay in this cocoon for 5 months and not have contact outside world, really? It's like the worst game of Survivor that they could create.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would work. And, I know no one cares about media in this situation, but that's as fascinating as anything to me, because, if you're going to have a couple reporters for each team, who's paying for that?
Right.
And, a 4-month hotel stay isn't cheap.
No.
It's in Arizona when it's 15 degrees in the summer.
And you need a rental car.
And how are they getting? Yeah. Do you need a rental car? Do you ride with the team on the bus?
Yeah.
It's also strange. And, the bottom line too is the product. Would the product be legitimate?
Right.
You're playing in these empty ballparks that are spring parks. They're not, you're where you're accustomed to playing in the regular season. There's no fans in the stadium. It's 100 degrees in Arizona, so the ball's carrying like crazy. I mean, it's just weird. Like, players wouldn't have the adrenaline they'd normally have. They wouldn't have the ramp up time in spring training they'd normally have. So I'm skeptical. I'm curious. And I'm interested to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I agree with you from the perspective of, and I've talked to other people about it, that billionaires and owners do not like to lose money. And I still think they're going to try to force this in some regard. Whether or not it's legit is a whole nother question. But something that definitely is legit is your new book. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Cleveland Rocked. Thank you. The personalities, sluggers, and magic of the 95 Indians. And obviously, much like many people, I remember this team vividly. It was my first year really covering this team. Covered a few games in 94 before the strike, but 95 is really where I was getting my feet wet on how to cover a baseball team, making tons of mistakes. But tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind the book. Of course, Triumph Books, which is a company I've done some business with, and I know you have as well. Your idea, did they pitch this to you? Did you pitch it to them? Was it having to do with the anniversary coming up this year? How did it all come about for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I can't imagine being basically a rookie reporter like you were, and that being your introduction to this job, with all those intimidating characters in the clubhouse. And, you're covering that team and you probably think this is the greatest job in the world. And
right.
I want it forever, which you have.
Yeah. Stuck around at least.
So, yeah, I mean, it's the most distinct team in team history. And we're talking 120 years. And no, they didn't win the World Series. 2 other teams in Indians history have done that. But you think about what it meant in terms of the Browns were leaving, the Indians had been 40 years, and then they finally looked like there might be a ray of sunshine in 94, and the strike hits.
Yep.
So they captivated the city like no team ever had. And it's the 25-year anniversary. And I had some ideas for maybe some stories I wanted to write during, but it was, that it hadn't developed into anything credible, because I started, this is my 4th book. So we've been throwing ideas at each other all the time for years now. Mm-hmm. And I had gotten to a point where I said, I don't really want to write another book until it's something either that's my idea, if something I wanted to write for a long time, which, I might have an idea or two, but otherwise doesn't really exist, or something that just like, I can't imagine not writing it and then someone else writes it. And I think, man, I wish I would have, taken that project on because it's such a cool story, or, there's just cool people involved. And so it was personalities, and the anniversary. And then they pitched the idea to me, mm-hmm. and it was, you know how it is, where sometimes you've got an idea, but it takes a while. You go back and forth. You're trying to hammer out the details. This was the easiest negotiating period I think I've ever had. So it was, it seemed like the perfect idea, 25-year anniversary. And I had dealt with all these guys before, so I knew I had access and hopefully would get some great stories out of it.
Yeah, and again, when you're talking about all those personalities, I mean, I could tell you some private stories, or I should say, stories that meant stuff to me during that season of dealing with players and guys like that. Nothing salacious, just, moments I remember, and there were just so many moments I remember. I think one of the early ones was, Manny Ramirez hits this incredible home run against Dennis Eckersley, and, we're all waiting for him after the game, and he just comes out with this big smile, and he says, "Not today." And you're like, wait a minute, we got to get you. You hit the game-winning home run. And that, just things like that I remember so vividly. Talk about the time frame, Zach. I mean, obviously, this isn't something you could do in 3 days, but when did it start? When did you start with it? And of course, when did you have it wrapped up by?
Yeah, so we negotiated a year ago in spring training, February-ish of 2019. Deadline was like mid-October. So, it's funny. You come to terms with a book deal and you think you've got 6, 7, 8 months to write it. And you got all the time in the world. Right. I don't even need to think about this until the summer. And man, it always sneaks up on you. I think that I had contacts with a lot of the players.
Right.
I had talked to the front officers before and knew I could reach out to them. And then anybody I didn't have, it just so happened were hosting the All-Star game.
Right.
So a lot of those guys came back, and if I needed to follow up with somebody or, bug somebody to get someone else's phone number, something like that, it came in handy. So I know everyone has a different process. For me, it was a lot of just talk to as many people as I can. I remember making a source list at the start of the process, and, you go on all these tangents where, you want to talk to all the players on the roster and the coaches and the front office people, but you also you never know if the backup third baseman's barber has a good story.
Right.
Something like that. So your list is like 100 people deep, and you basically just try to off one by one everybody you can and load up on as many stories as you can. Then circle back to people to follow up with something or confirm someone else's story. And it's just this long process, and then to write the thing. So, organization is huge, and the structure, and how 7 or 8 months can fly by, and you're still trying to hammer out some words with 10 seconds left until your deadline.
Tell me a little bit about some of these players that you got a chance to speak to. I mean, obviously, the guys like Alomar, I'm assuming rather accessible since he's here. But, of course, the one name everybody's going to ask you about, and I'll be the first, is Albert Bell. Was there any connection there? Did you try? Was it just a no thank you? Or was it, I'm going to hang up the phone on you? How did that go? And was there anybody else that maybe surprised you that you either didn't get or maybe that you even did get?
Yeah, Albert and I, we had some back and forth for a while, and he was giving me a hard time for a little bit. I will never try to figure him out. Yeah. I think anyone who would try to do that, it would be like the most difficult science project you've ever tried to tackle in your life. But no, I mean, the cool thing is it's been 25 years. So I think a lot of, they love to reminisce about that season, because what's crazy is that you had all these personalities and this team is just so good and they're all so cocky, and yet there were very few issues. Right. I mean, obviously everyone knows the story about Albert Bell smashing the thermostat or flipping over a dinner table or stuff like that. But there were not these huge blowouts derailed the team. That's something that Mike Hargrove always talked about, was that it all worked. They all were able to mess when it mattered. So now, being 25 years later, they love to reminisce about it, and they love to, because it was such a perfect journey until the very end. And so, it doesn't matter who you talk to. I mean, I was telling you, I talked to Kenny Lofton tons of times for this book throughout the spring and the summer. And I got to a point where I felt bad, and I kept assuring him, if I'm pestering you, tell me to bug. And he was like, I love talking about that team. Wow. I can't talk about it enough. So it's cool because they love reliving that. They love remembering all the character personalities and the guys that didn't get the attention back then. I tried to shine a little bit of light on Alvaro Espinoza and Wayne Kirby, Tony Pena, yeah, who played a big role and meant a lot to some other people in the clubhouse, but because they didn't have big biceps or the big statistics, they maybe didn't get a ton of attention.
It was interesting. I told you earlier, I'm a few chapters in. I haven't read all of it yet. But the one thing that I thought was kind of interesting about Lofton was that whole thing about, him coming out and saying that the season was like chaos, but it was like what he determined, I think it was fun chaos. And that's interesting because, again, as being a young reporter, I was 19 years old, and being in there every night, you had Carlos Baerga with, bongo drums. You had, obviously, as you mentioned early on in the book, the Montel Jordan song every single night that they won. And I could see where he means that. It wasn't like, guys didn't like each other. They did. But genuinely, it was almost like a frat house.
I think they all had one common denominator, and that was they were hungry to win. And, it was like some of the guys, I think there were cliques in the clubhouse, and that's true with most clubhouses. But, some guys got along. Some guys had nothing in common and never needed to speak. I mean, we all know the story about Manny Ramirez thinking Chad OJ was the one in the white Bronco, not OJ Simpson. Right. And it's like those guys probably said a word to each other in their lives until then. But they all had the common bond of when they got on the field, they wanted to just annihilate the opposition. And I think, you hear guys tell the stories of, there was the clubhouse, you had music blasting, you had guys goofing off. And then at 6:00, they'd see Mike Hargrove and it would be like, okay, 1 hour till game time, just shut that off, flip the switch and focus. And it worked. I mean, you think about all the talent and the ego, but I think what made it work is that it was early in the tenure of winning, where 94, they got it. 95 was the first chance had where they knew they were good and they could potentially win a World Series. After that, you had some roster turnover and been there before, so maybe you don't take every single day quite as seriously. But there's no better example of they clinch on September 8th. Yep. They have 3 weeks left of the season and nobody wants to sit out. No. They still want to play every day. They want to get total up to 100. They want to just absolutely destroy everybody. And you never see that anymore. That was a unique thing about that team.
I know we're a little bit short on time here. I don't want to go too long with you, but I did want to ask you specifically. You mentioned, about the tenure of where this team was at in '95, and it always interested me because, and I think MLB, I guess it would be television, did a fantastic job with that '90s Indians, documentary they did. I think it was either last year or the year before. Because really, Zach, by the time '96 rolled around, I mean, this team was almost already being broken up. Baerga was traded for Jeff Kent in New York. Eddie Murray was gone. Bell was going to leave via free agency. Everybody kind of knew that. So, while everybody remembers the '95 team, really by '96 and certainly heading into '97 after they traded Lofton for Marquise Grissom and David Justice, this was not the same team.
From in the office, he says something like, I wish there was a way to know when you're in the good old days.
Yeah.
Like, it almost reminds me of 2016 where, they go to Game 7 of the World Series, they fall short, they had a 3-1 lead, but I think most people think, okay, well, we'll get them next year because they ran out of gas, they had all those injuries. It's early enough in the tenure of winning where you're okay with it. You can accept first shortcoming. And then 2017 hits and you lose to the Yankees and it's like you press that panic button.
Yeah.
Because you think, when are we going to get one? We've had 2 good chances here. And you're right. Like you don't keep the same team forever. Guys don't stay good forever. And that happened in the 90s. They lose in the division series in 96. And then 97, for a long time, they weren't a very good team.
Nope.
And they came together, they make the run to the World Series. But then another shortcoming, it's like, I think fans, you change your disposition. Not just all, like in 95, it was all positive. Mm-hmm. There was nothing negative to say. There was, it was all new and it was all perfect. Mm-hmm. And by 98, it's like, I like this team. They're a good team, but it's frustrating. And I need to see it in October before I can, feel 100% about them. I think that's kind of similar to where the Indians are now, where it's like, we know they have a good team. They need to prove it in October and make a run. So it worked out well that this was basically the first team, or at least the one that had a full season and a postseason, to win over Cleveland. And they did that like few other teams ever have.
Yeah, I don't think there was anybody in the state, well, I shouldn't say in the state, anybody in Northeast Ohio anyway that didn't have either an Indians AL Central champion shirt or a hat, or it was everywhere. It really was like the movie Major League when you see people walking down the street and every person had a Ricky Vaughn shirt or an Indian shirt, and they're all like, pointing at each other and everything. It really, on a nightly basis, Zach, I mean this, cars were, they would honk horns. It was literally like a party every night. And now it's almost like you said, 25 years later, it's very different now.
Remember those shirts that had like, I want to say they did this in 95, but I know they did it in 97 with, they like Indians and Marlins on the front, and then on the back it would have lineups.
Yeah,
the full
absolutely.
rosters.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like you still see those once in a while.
Once in a blue moon. Yeah, for sure.
All the cool, the old gear from the 90s is pretty cool.
Yeah, and you could, eBay it or find it somewhere, but, it is cool to have. So, well, again, I know I don't want to go too long with you because I know you're a busy man. You've got to be quarantined still, and, maybe we'll get baseball back one of these days. But again, the book is Cleveland Rocked. It's the story of the 95 Indians, probably the most memorable team in team history. I don't think there's any question about that. And, of course, you can find it right now on Amazon. You said some people are already getting it.
The official release date is May 12th, but I've heard from a bunch of people who pre-ordered it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Triumph Books, it's at any local bookstore in Cleveland, too, who have already received it.
Wow,
so,
that's awesome. But again, Amazon or Barnes & Noble's website or wherever books are sold, you can pick it up. It was funny. I asked you before we went on or before I started recording, you going to do any book signings? And you're like, they're all closed. I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. So
there was a way to digitally sign, so I don't
know. All I know is I got.
If anyone wants to forge my name,
yeah,
and just pretend my signature's terrible anyway. Go ahead.
Well, I got my signed copy, so that's all that really matters, So, and I can't thank you enough again for the dedication in there as well. That means a lot. And, I'm glad you got it done. I know I asked you about 600 times if you were close. And I think by the 595th time you said you're getting there.
Well, I know, because we do this all the time when either of us is writing a book and you ask. I think in those 600 times, it could be a different answer, completely different. It's like predicting the weather.
Yeah, really. It's crazy.
You have good days and bad days. So
for me, it was always like a weight. And the minute that I printed that last word or wrote or typed that last word, it was like the weight is off my shoulders. But, if you've ever written a book, you know that it's not quite as easy as that, because then you got to go back and proofread and, reread it. And then it's not as easy as you think, folks, if you want to write a book or something like that. But Triumph is a great company. Like I said, I've worked with them. Zach has now worked with them with 4 books. And of course, I think the other couple books did really, really well. So I expect this one to be, if not the best of the 4 as far as sales, I think it's going to be right there.
Well, I just know, remember the last week of the regular season when the Indians were fighting for a wild card?
Sure.
I think we were in Chicago and then D.C.
Yep.
And I knew I had, you have the material at that point, but you have to organize
transcribe it. Yep.
Yeah, and make sure it all makes sense and you have everything the way you want it. And so there's still a lot of writing left to do till the very end. And the Indians have this incredible second half. Yeah. And I'm on the road thinking, okay, I don't know if I'm going to have to cover a wild card game, a tiebreaker to get to a wild card game, a division series. Book to finish. So if you asked me that week, I probably yelled at you or something. But, then a couple weeks later when it's all over, it's feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I can't wait to finish it myself. Again, a couple chapters in, and I know a lot of Indians fans are going to enjoy it. Again, it's Zach Meisel of The Athletic. Great website, subscription website, but they put out awesome material on a daily basis on everybody, actually. It's not just, of course, the Indians, Browns, Cavaliers. If you're a fan of a team in another city, definitely check them out. So there you go. And Zach, thank you for taking the time with me today. And, of course, we will hopefully get a chance to do this a couple times during the season, if there is a season, and whether or not you're here in Arizona or I'm in Arizona and you're here, wherever, we probably will catch up at some point.
Sounds good. I'm glad you're home. I'm feeling. Thanks for having me.
Sort of.